Welcome to Mortification of Spin, a casual conversation about things that count, with Carl Trueman and Todd Pruitt, a podcast of the Alliance of Confessing Evangelicals. Let's join this week's conversation.
You are listening to Mortification of Spin. My name is Todd Pruitt. I'm the pastor of Covenant Presbyterian Church in Harrisonburg, Virginia, and I'm joined as always by my friend Carl Trueman, who is a teacher at Grove City College, currently this year on loan to Notre Dame. And Carl, what's it like to be the Fighting Irish now for a year?
You know? Oh, no, the token Protestant, you mean? I have my Luther bobblehead in my office, and
are there a lot of fighting songs and drinking songs going on? These are Irish, right?
I have to say they're sort of Irish. The football culture is breathtaking. I've never seen anything like it. You'll get 100,000 people coming from outside South Bend on a game Saturday.
Right.
20,000 of whom don't have tickets. Yeah. So 20,000 people just come to catch the vibe or soak up the atmosphere or something. I've never seen anything like it. And they arrive 36 to 48 hours before kickoff.
Right.
In Britain, if I'm going to a rugby match in Britain and the kickoff say at 3:00, I turn up at 2:15 to find my seat, and I'm gone by 5:15.
Right.
Here, it's like a major commitment. If ever you wanted a sign of the idolatry of sport in American culture.
Well, it's interesting because, Notre Dame is one of those schools where the football culture is a major, I mean, it's right up there. Like, you've got University of Michigan. You've got, at
Penn
one
State,
point,
probably.
University of Penn State. And Notre Dame, like those three schools, maybe Ohio State could be up there, but that's the upper echelon of college football experience.
We don't talk about Ohio State on campus.
No, I wouldn't think so.
That's a sore point. I was talking to somebody the other day about if there'd been a factum when Nathan Hatch had been provost, of course.
Oh, okay.
And I said, of course, Nathan Hatch, the most highest ranked Protestant ever at Notre Dame. I said, he was the number 2. And the guy said to me, no, he was number 3. He said, first you have the president, then you have the head coach of the football team, then you have the provost. And I think even the president head coach ranking is debatable.
That's probably a neck and neck race right there.
But they've made me very welcome. I'm having a lovely time. It's a super year.
Well, Carl, you've recently written a piece that, according to when I check in on X, has all of the right people upset, which gives me no small amount of gratification.
If you rattle the cages, the inmates will get very annoyed.
That's right. Throw a rock into the darkness, and the dog that yelps is the one that got hit.
Yeah.
So for those of you who have not read Carl's recent piece over at First Things, he coins a term, gig, as in G-I-G, gig Eva as in evangelicalism. Carl, explain that a little bit.
Yeah, well, probably about 10 or 15 years ago, I coined, tongue-in-cheek, the term Big Eva to refer to what I thought was an interesting phenomenon taking place at the time. And that was where certain big conferences were not simply providing opportunities for Christians to gather together and hear great teaching, but were sort of aspiring to drive the shape of Christianity and church life in the United States. And so I tongue-in-cheek, I coined this term Big Eva, and I talked about how it was populated by what I call celebrity pastors. And what I meant by celebrity pastor was not simply somebody who was well-known or did a podcast or wrote books that people buy, but a pastor who was wittingly or unwittingly leveraging their broader parachurch public profile to have an influence well beyond the congregations and the denominations to which they were called. In the years since, Big Eva has just become this sort of amorphous term of abuse. It lacks the specificity I originally gave it, and it's become, in very recent years, a way of, I think, denigrating the previous generation or the slightly older generation of evangelical and Christian leaders. And what I was trying to get at with Gig Evo, this term Gig Eva, clearly there's a tongue-in-cheek dimension. It rhymes with Big Eva. I also knew that connection would rile the people I was thinking about immensely, because they their constant refrain is often, I thank you, Lord, that I'm not like other men, like these Big Eva people who came before me. What I'm getting at here is that really the structure of public discourse and influence has changed in the last decade. That we're past, in some ways, past the era, not of big conferences in terms of, big conferences still take place, but in terms of where a lot of people go for their immediate influence. It's moved online, and it's more informal. It lacks, in some ways, some of the meritocratic dimensions that Big Eva, for all its faults, had. You had to be able to fill a stadium to be invited to speak, for example, which meant you've got to have something going for you. You've got to be a good speaker.
Good preacher, you've written some good books.
Gig Eva really favors those who are able to build up platforms on Twitter. And Twitter is not a meritocratic form of discourse at all. I think it's a transgressive form of discourse. Who has the most... who gets the most mileage on Twitter? It's people who are increasingly transgressive, increasingly offensive. They don't need to put across arguments. They simply need to be outrageous. It's, in some ways, it's kind of, Twitter is the sort of online version of like drag queen story hour. It's not the talent of these people that gets attention. It's their outrageousness. And in a way, that's even more disturbing than Big Eva, because, as I say, Big Eva did have this sort of semblance of meritocracy about it. And most of the figures that we associate with Big Eva, one could think of a Tim Keller, or, and some of them are friends of ours, Mark Dever, for example, T4G. We would say those guys are basically good guys. They have, they contributed a lot. Okay, they had a platform presence at conferences, but they also served their local churches well and faithfully. Whereas on Gig Eva, you've just got to be a loud-mouthed, maybe even a foul-mouthed person, and you can attract attention. And it also drew attention. There's a certain, I was a critic of Big Eva, and the way they dealt with criticism then was they ignored you in public. They made discreet phone calls to your employer. That was sort of my experience. On Gig Eva, they don't answer your arguments. They just trash your character. And it's kind of satisfying to write a piece where the response is saying I'm wrong, actually prove that I'm right.
Absolutely. That was kind of the point I was going to make. And it was really interesting is that the critics, one of the things they were howling about is you don't name anyone. Well, sometimes there's a time to name names. Other times it's appropriate to simply describe the bad behavior, one, in hopes that maybe a few thoughtful people that have been engaging in that behavior will go, you know what, that describes me, and I think it's right, and I shouldn't behave that way anymore. And by not naming them, then possibly you've given them an on-ramp to repentance maybe that they wouldn't have gotten before. The other way it's helpful is that by not naming them, then they quickly identify themselves.
Oh, yes. From the start, I don't do Twitter, but from the things that were sent to me, the very people I had in mind were the people shouting most loudly. And of course, on Twitter, I don't know who's real and who isn't. How many of these things are anons? Not much point in naming an anon. And the other side of it, of course, is that if you name people, then you immediately get slammed for not speaking to them privately. As if Matthew 18 applies to people who are outrageously acting in public. they haven't sinned against me privately. They just behave like jerks in public. And that, I think, means that Matthew 18 doesn't apply in quite the same way.
And that's what, that's what X, formerly Twitter, enables. You mentioned earlier, it's almost an inherently transgressive form. And the reason, because it so quickly taps into what's sinful in us, meaning I can send out an unthoughtful ad hominem attack on someone, and I've got a big enough platform that all of my anonymous followers will join in. And one of the things that's troubling is you can tell a lot about a man by the character of his disciples, the character of his followers, and invariably these guys, they have an army of mostly anonymous online followers. And these guys are anonymous because they behave so atrociously online while claiming to be Christian. Their language is foul. Their attacks are all ad hominem against brothers in Christ. And they're simply kind of aping the character of the guy that they're cheering on.
Yeah,
and how that does not give more of these guys pause when you look at the people behind you who are supporting you, behaving so poorly. When do you stop and say, what am I doing exactly here?
Well, I think that's the sort of poker tell that tells you the real game. I mean, the attack on the character of critics, which is fairly standard. I mean, I'm not unique in that. It's the way they go after. They don't engage arguments. They always attack the character of their critics. And they don't corral or distance themselves from their most egregious followers. I think that indicates that what's really going on is it's not a pursuit of truth. It's a pursuit of market share. They're not interested in coming up with better arguments. They're not interested in saying, well, actually, Trueman makes a good point here. But maybe we can move beyond that. Maybe we can save the sister, etc. What they do is they say, oh, Trueman's an evil scumbag, and we detest him. Well, that's a competition for market share. And that's interesting to me because, again, that's a parallel with the most egregious aspects of Big Eva. Big Eva was not interested in addressing the legitimate criticisms of its critics. It was interested in shutting its critics out, making sure that they didn't get a platform. And that was a market share thing. So again, when I look at the events surrounding my piece, which were, I have to say, most gratifying in good ways, I think it confirms again that this gig Eva, the game is not actually the upbuilding of the church. No. The game is the upbuilding of personal platforms and excluding those we don't approve of from market share.
Right. And it's interesting. I'm a pastor in the Presbyterian Church in America, and a lot of these guys make the PCA kind of their whipping boy. We have folks in the PCA who maybe shouldn't be in the PCA. Maybe they ought to. Some of them need to really reckon with where they stand in terms of what our confession of faith is clear on, what our book of church order is clear on. You can find no small number of pastors in the PCA that will acknowledge that, we've got some goofiness here and there. Of course, what denomination doesn't? And that's part of the problem with these online guys is that they have a standard of purity that they themselves cannot possibly meet themselves. And so one of the things, and you're well aware of this, Carl, one of the ways that they will take a crack at you or a crack at me is because perhaps, we have a former friend that we were very close to who has gone in directions that has been sad for us and been unfortunate. And they'll constantly bring that up, not realizing their friends, some of who have done, just outrageous things. And but again, it's the quick hit that they're looking for, not a thoughtful engagement, but the quick side swipe. Yeah, and you wrote something a while back in response to some of the excesses in the Christian nationalist movement, where you just simply called for us as Christians to evaluate ourselves on the basis of Jesus and on the basis of the cross. And you literally were mocked for that by some of these guys.
Yeah, I think one of the most notorious Christian nationalists referred to it as garbage or something.
Garbage, yeah.
And to me, I mean, that doesn't hurt me because I live in the real world. I don't live online. But I felt it was eloquent of that particular individual's heart, that a piece that I thought was simply applying the teaching of Paul in Corinthians to how we behave in public was described
low-hanging
as garbage.
fruit.
Yeah. I felt kind of sad. And, the recent events surrounding my post, the Gig Eva post, produced a very sad example. As we know, there was a PCA pastor caught by police in a prostitution scandal. Now, should that man be disciplined? Should he be kicked out of the ministry? I would say on the surface of the reports, yes. But it has to be done through proper process. It can't be done by an online mob. But what struck me as interesting was how some people used that tragic incident and that sin as a way of, guess what, building their own platform. For most of us, when we hear of the fall, and some pastors that I love and some pastors that I've clashed with have fallen terribly. And the appropriate reaction to such falls is always, I think, first of all, to be very sad for the shame brought to the name of Christ and to his church in public. Then to think about you might get the forgotten victims in all this. The woman prostitute who was involved, for example, the family and the children and the wife of the man. The last thing that should be on a Christian's mind, let alone a Christian pastor's mind, is this is a great opportunity for bigging myself up over against the PCA and enhancing my platform. If you do that, then at that point I'm thinking, okay, I know something about the color of your heart. And I want nothing to do with that. And frankly, I don't care what you think about me, because you played your hand at this point, and I don't value the respect of somebody like that.
That was a very, very sad thing. It occurred just last week, and I remember when I got the news of it. This was someone who's in a very different camp than I am in the PCA, and my first thoughts were, on the one hand, it was grief, because I've never met this man, although he's written a few unkind things about me on social media in the past, but I grieved. I mean, just how terribly sad. I thought, what must this have done to his wife and to his children, to his church?
Four or five kids, I'm told.
Exactly. And then I stopped and thought, wow, you know what? I need to spend some time examining my heart, know. And as you mentioned, when something like that happens, part of the necessary Christian response is not to slam dunk on the guy publicly, but to say, Lord, how vulnerable am I to these things? Where am I sinning? There should be an utter sobriety. The other thing is that this is an ecclesiastical matter as well. That church and that presbytery responded immediately. And began practicing the tools we have as PCA, according to our church order, to begin responding immediately. And all indications are they're responding very responsibly, by the book, with compassion towards his family. But yet this one particular guy who has set himself up as the savior of the PCA, he's not even in the PCA, but he's going to save the PCA. He began publicly slamming this guy. And I thought, what if his wife were to see that? What if one of his sons or daughters were to see that, this guy doing a victory lap because this guy fell into sin? And like you said, it really shows the color of the heart. Like this brother, and if he listens to this, and I wouldn't be surprised if he does when he sees the title of the podcast when it goes out, because he'll want to slam it.
Of course.
But if he listens to this, I would appeal to him, brother, search your heart. Something's wrong. Something's wrong.
I think the phrase you said, I mean, I hardly know. I'm only vaguely aware of this guy.
Yeah.
But I think you sent me a phrase, gig Eva doesn't approve of prostitution or something. Well,
Yes.
no Christian should do. And the
Right.
PCA doesn't approve of prostitution.
Right.
That's not something that divides big Eva, gig
Yeah.
Eva, and proper ecclesiology.
Yeah. Exactly.
It's irrelevant. And also,
Right.
I'd have to say, the difference between gig Eva and the PCA is the PCA has procedures for dealing with this
That's
stuff.
right.
It doesn't become whatever the Twitter mob, whatever the taste of the day for the Twitter mob
Exactly.
is, right or wrong, becomes the default law of the land.
Yep.
There are actually procedures to protect everybody involved and to make sure that the right thing is done.
Exactly. And part of a decent response to that horrific news last week would not have been, how can I dunk on the PCA for this? But to realize that I don't care how healthy of a denomination you have.
Yeah.
Or let's even take it down further. I don't care how healthy of a church you have.
Yeah.
You're going to have people who sin.
Yeah.
You're going to have people who do things that scandalize the name of Christ. Yeah. And this prideful, I'm not like that. We're not like that. I mean, we have history to prove that that's just never the case.
Yeah. And I mean, you're always in a no-win situation with the secular culture on this, because, if the church ignores sin, then, the Washington Post will run things saying it's a cover-up.
Right.
If the church addresses sin, and I'm thinking of the example of the ACNA bishop at the moment, or archbishop, who's been subject to this. If the church tries to address sin using its procedures, then the wider culture will say the church is full of hypocrites.
Right.
But it's one thing for the Washington Post to say that. It's another thing for brothers in Christ to say that about each other.
Exactly. And someone who's presenting himself as, I'm here to help you. I'm the guy. And, I want to say, well, who are you? You're not in the PCA. Apparently, the elders in the church you serve don't know how to say no to you. I have limits. There's limits placed on me by the elders that I serve with at my church. I have actual accountability. Yeah. Like, there are things I'm not allowed to post.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
there's real accountability.
Yeah.
I can't behave any way I want to behave on social media. I'm literally, without putting my job in jeopardy.
Yeah.
Because there's real structures, because that's the value of the church.
Yeah.
Is that part of the value of good church polity is that it also helps keep a check on a pastor's sinful impulses.
Yeah.
And
you, of course, I'm assuming you self-police on this, Todd.
Absolutely.
It's not that you run every social media post past your elders. No. You just know that there are certain things you don't do as a pastor.
That's right.
It'll prove a stumbling block to somebody, or you'll
That's right. And I've had to learn that. I've had to learn that. But the point is, I learned that in the we tend to learn those things in a structure of accountability. And this is why the church is so important. And like you said, back to the gig Eva, like you said, with big Eva, you had guys that were connected directly to churches. In a lot of cases, good churches.
Yeah.
Where there was good structure. I mean, some of these guys, we know their churches. They're, in some cases, they're churches that we would be comfortable going to.
Absolutely. I mean, a guy like Mark Dever, somebody that I would trust with my life, if I could put it that way.
Absolutely. So. And when Mark Dever's too liberal for you, and not that I've agreed with every single thing, Mark, but I'm sure he loses tons of sleep, to know that I might not agree with every single thing he says.
He's a pretty insecure guy.
Yeah. But good grief, I'll take his record over any of these online edgelords who don't seem to be accountable to anyone.
No,
I'll take Mark Dever over them every day of the week.
Yeah. Yeah, and again, as you move onto the internet, I think that, stepping back a bit, I would say this is part of the broader problem in our culture at the moment, this disembodied form of engagement. It doesn't just, the problems in the church are just a microcosm of the wider problems in culture at large.
Right.
It's not, and let me just say, this is not a polemic against technology.
No.
It's a call for us to think critically and reflectively about how technology shapes our behavior and shapes our interaction with other people. That we all know it is so much easier to dismiss somebody or trash them online than it is to look them in the eye in the same room and speak to them.
Exactly, which is what we ought to endeavor to do.
Yeah, and again, not setting myself up as any paragon of virtue here. I've learned the hard way on this one.
Right.
But I think, one learns and one realizes, I disagree with this person, but the fact they disagree with me is not an insult to my existence. I don't need to destroy them. And secondly, they are more than the set of beliefs that they hold. Mm-hmm. They're a father, they're a husband, they're a brother, they're a son, they're a pastor. We need to treat them as such and be very careful how we speak about them. So.
Yeah, indeed.
Well, anyway, Todd, I think once again we have made the world a much better place.
The world is so much better than it was 25 minutes ago.
Isn't it? Well, I'm sure that not all of you will have enjoyed this program, but to the guest listeners out there, we thank you for joining us. Please visit our website, mortificationofspin.org, and you can stand a chance there to win a book that's probably maybe 15, 20 years old now, but still worth reading. It's Guy Prentice Waters' little book, How Jesus Runs the Church. And it's a great, basic, clear introduction to Presbyterian church government. Now, you don't have to be a Presbyterian to read this book and enjoy it. You can be a Baptist or a Congregationalist and just ignore the bits you disagree with, if I can put it that way. But what Guy does in that book is make a good case for the fact that the New Testament sets forth a pattern by which its local congregations and its public testimony is to be organized and regulated. So I would strongly recommend that book to you. Please enter for a chance to win it. If you don't win the book, please buy a copy and read it. In the meantime, all that's left is for me to thank my guest today, Todd Pruitt, for joining us and sharing his wisdom, and to say that we look forward to being with you again in 2 weeks' time.
Thanks for listening to Mortification of Spin, a podcast of the Alliance of Confessing Evangelicals. For more on topics like this, visit mortificationofspin.org, where you can find other articles by Carl and Todd, browse the archive of past episodes, and make a donation. We'll talk to you next time on Mortification of Spin.